The city woke with a kind of determined chaos. Streets buzzed with cars, horns blaring in discordant rhythm, and sidewalks pulsed with the hurried steps of people chasing destinations. Among them was Anna, clutching her coffee cup as though it were an anchor against the tumult of her morning. The world was alive, but Anna's mind was elsewhere, locked in the labyrinth of deadlines and ambitions that framed her life. She entered the towering office building, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Familiar faces greeted her in passing, but her replies were automatic, empty. She was preoccupied, her thoughts consumed by a major project she hoped would secure her long-desired promotion. By the afternoon, the rhythm of her day shattered. In the sterile calm of her boss's office, Anna stared at the envelope he handed her. His words, though gently spoken, rang like a thunderclap in her ears. "Anna, I'm sorry, but your position has been eliminated." The envelope, heavy with severance papers, felt like a cruel joke in her trembling hands. She nodded mechanically, words failing her. As she left the office for the last time, the bustling city outside seemed distant, like a scene from a silent film. She wandered aimlessly until she found herself in a park. The world moved on around her, joggers, children laughing, pigeons fluttering near an old man tossing crumbs. Anna collapsed onto a bench, staring blankly at the envelope. The old man beside her, noticing her despair, spoke gently. "Rough day?" Anna barely nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "I've been there," he continued. "Lost my job once, too. Thought my whole world had ended." He chuckled, the sound warm and unburdened. "Turns out, it was the beginning of something better." She turned to him, her brow furrowed. "How can you say that? Everything I worked for is gone." The man smiled, the lines of his face deepening with a quiet wisdom. "Not everything. You still have you." The simplicity of his words unsettled her. She wanted to argue, to explain the magnitude of her loss, but he continued before she could. "You remind me of myself, years ago," he said. "Would you like to hear a story?" Anna nodded, if only to distract herself from her own thoughts. "I worked in a factory for 20 years, the man began. Steady job, good pay. Then one day, they shut it down. Just like that. I was furious. Terrified. I thought, what am I supposed to do now?" He paused, letting the memory settle before continuing. "I spent weeks wallowing. Then one day, I picked up an old hammer my father had given me. He'd been a carpenter, taught me a few things when I was a boy. I started tinkering, making furniture, fixing things for neighbors. It wasn't long before I realized I loved it. Really loved it." His eyes sparkled as he spoke. "Now, here I am, decades later. I've built a life I never could have imagined back in that factory. Losing that job? Best thing that ever happened to me." Anna's skepticism lingered. "But what if I can't do that? What if I can't handle the change?" The man's smile softened. "Think of it like a river," he said. "You're not supposed to fight the current. You're supposed to flow with it." His words echoed in her mind long after he left. That night, alone in her apartment, Anna found herself reaching for an old sketchbook she hadn't touched in years. It was buried in a box at the back of her closet, covered in dust. She flipped through pages of half-finished designs and forgotten ideas. Memories of a younger, more hopeful version of herself resurfaced, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of something other than despair. The days that followed were not easy. Anna applied for job after job, facing rejection after rejection. But each no pushed her to refine her portfolio, to create new designs, to rediscover the artist she had once been. Months later, she stood in a small gallery, surrounded by her own artwork. The room buzzed with conversation as visitors admired her pieces. A client approached her, enthusiastic about a potential commission. Anna smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She thought of the man in the park, of his story, and of the river he'd spoken of. He was right. Losing her job hadn't been the end, it had been a redirection, a chance to reconnect with a part of herself she had long abandoned. One evening, she returned to the park, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. The river nearby flowed steadily, its surface shimmering in the fading light. She saw the old man again, feeding pigeons as he had before. "You were right," she said as she approached him. He looked up, smiling knowingly. "Told you, didn't I?" They sat together in companionable silence, watching the river. Its waters, ever-changing, reflected the colors of the setting sun. Anna spoke softly, more to herself than to him. "The river doesn't stop, does it?" "No," he replied. "And neither do we." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Anna felt a deep, unshakable calm. The current of life would carry her forward, as it always had. All she had to do was let it.